Okay, I'm Divon, and since it's late and everybody's had a beer or two, I'll do something a little bit lighter, I think, and tell you some war stories with a business insight at the end. I actually want to talk about my previous life before starting Blackpool Ventures. I spent 8 or 9 years working at Google. And I was responsible for bringing Google's products to frontier markets, which is basically countries that Google has nothing in. So developing countries from Papua New Guinea in the east to Senegal in the west. Sorry. Um, and there's two topics that I'm personally spend a lot of my time thinking about. Which I'm passionate about. One is languages, and whoever knows me here knows I can go on hours and hours talking about languages. And the second is unique business opportunities. And I want to connect these two and tell you a little insight I had working at Google. So this is actually about launching, let me take a step back. So I spent 8 years traveling country to country. I've been on the ground in 70 countries. And always looking at what are the barriers to internet? Why is only 1%, 5%, 10% of the population using the internet? This was a few years ago. And and there's many barriers for many reasons, but in some countries, Cambodia included, the main issue was language. The main issue is the majority of the population is monolingual. They speak only one language, and that language is not supported by the technology world. And that was, that's a situation in Cambodia, and that's a situation in about 70 other countries that have unique national languages. So once I understood that, that's one of the barriers, I tried to fix it. And I basically tried to get my employer to agree, please, to launch in my countries. The interesting thing is I got a lot of support from the top, Eric Schmidt and so on, and I got a big budget to do this. But the way the technology industry works, whereas it's a big company like Google or it's a startup, the product is run by a person whose title is product manager. And that guy, his job is to be very data-driven, look at the spreadsheet, look at the data, and decide what's the right thing to do. And guess what? Getting Android launched in Khmer was not on the top 100 priorities. Somehow we managed to do that. So we launched, so in KitKat, we managed to launch, I managed to get 13 languages into KitKat. That was the last language launch of Google. And this is not just Android itself, it's Google Maps and Gmail and fonts and keyboards and handwriting recognition and the whole thing. We did it for Khmer, Lao, Myanmar, Mongolian, some languages in Central Asia and Africa. I thought, I was always, my wife is Khmer. Her mother-in-law speaks only Khmer. So I was always saying, okay, my objective, my success criteria for myself, am I achieving something in my life, is I want my mother-in-law to be able to use the internet and to be able to use services. So every time I came and checked if, what's the progress. So when we launched Android, that was a huge step for people in these countries, including Cambodia, to be able to use the internet, people that are not in this room, that don't understand English. Unfortunately, it was only a partial success. And the reason is that even though the operating system is now in Khmer, and there's Khmer fonts, which is a big deal. If you remember before, there were no Khmer fonts, and it was a big mess. The applications that people use are not in Khmer, except the local ones developed in Cambodia. Why? Same reason. There's a product manager in some other company, and he goes through the list. He launches in English. 3 years later, he launches in French and Spanish. And another 2 years, another 10 languages, Japanese, Italian, German. And he's done. That's it. He's promoted, moves to another job, and Khmer never gets launched. By the way, one thing that made me really happy, I'm really not a big Apple fan. Sorry, all the iPhones owner. I've really not liked Apple since Apple II. And the big happiness of leaving Google is I could actually dump the Mac and move back to a Windows laptop. But one thing that made me really happy is about a year after we launched KitKat with these 13 languages, in the next version of iOS, they added exactly the same 13 languages to iOS. So clearly, you know, companies obviously look at what each other are doing. So the Khmer issue on the operating system is solved, but the applications are not. There were several things that various companies tried to do about this. In Android Play, for example, application developers can very easily find translators to translate applications, but they're still not doing it. And here's the business opportunity. There are several tens of countries that have a unique national language. By the way, this is the exception rather than the rule. Actually, most countries in the world don't have a unique language. I mean, they have many unique languages, which makes them pick English as a national language or French. But there's a few tens that have a national language, and of them, most have a national language that doesn't get translated. So in this region, if things are translated to regional languages, it will be Indonesian and Vietnamese and Thai, maybe, and that's about it. Nobody translates to Laos, Myanmar, Cambodia. And that is the opportunity. Because of the structural problem of how the technology industry is managed, products never get localized. So there's a gap here for a company or companies in a country like Cambodia that understand the importance of language to extend specifically into these countries that are being neglected by the global technology industry. So that's my message. Something to file in the back of your head when you're thinking about the strategy for a company and expanding to more countries.